Someone who is just beginning to build their connection with the Lord, it can be a little difficult looking at the Bible and seeing how thick it is in terms of material. And when reading Bartholomew and Goheen, it made it very easy to understand as a sequential order. And in Act 1, it talks about how God is establishing his kingdom through the first 7 days of creation, and then eventually goes on to make Adam and Eve. And then eventually, in Act 2, we have the rebellion of the kingdom. In the rebellion of the kingdom, we see that Adam and Eve are tricked into sinning by ways of a serpent that is later known as Satan. With that being done, God questions them, and eventually Adam admits that Eve told him that he too should take a bite from the tree of life. And with that being done, God was upset with how they had disobeyed him and punished them. For Eve and her consequences, the Lord made it to where women's birth was more painful, and for men in general, they made it to where that their work would be required to have fruitful harvests whenever it came to their farming. Eventually, after that, it shows Act 3, which is where personally I thought a bulk of the material was covered in this book, due to it being separated into two scenes and talking about Israel and the story of its people and how it comes to be founded. In Act 3, we see how Adam and Eve remained married and then had Cain and Abel. Then Cain grew jealous of Abel and eventually killed him. This shows that even with God's creations, there is now not only just sin and defying the Lord, but also the anger that we can feel between each other and the dangerous implications that sin festering can have. Eventually, we go on to see a man named Lamech who has a son named Noah, and Noah eventually goes on to form a covenant with the Lord, and Noah's Ark is built. And after that, we go to see the Tower of Babel, and when the Tower of Babel begins, we see a mass confusion of God's people and how they can misinterpret messages from him and between one another. And then after that, we go to see on Abraham, who is tested by the Lord. Eventually, his son, Isaac, goes on to have his own children, Esau and Jacob. After their story, we go to see the one of Moses, who becomes the liberator of the Israelites. And then in scene 2, we see the cycle of sin and how prominent of a role it takes in this part of the story. And it goes on to show how Israel falls further and further into negative emotions. After that, we have Act 4 talking about Jesus as he heals those around him and goes on to then be reawakened after dying on the cross for our sins, which is in Act 5. And then eventually it comes down to Act 6, the return of the King, redemption completed. In this act, we see an image painted of what is to come and how that we should keep our faith to the Lord and wait on the prophecies that are still waiting to be fulfilled.